Welcome to Effective Evolution again. And today we're going over the panorama of Mars, which is 24146. And this is a snow and ice covered surface. And there are some interesting structures that are or appear to be under the surface. And we'll go over some of those areas and use the various tools, such as the transform tools and filtering tools or whatnot, and come up with some thoughts regarding what they could imply. And in particular, you'll notice some crater-like areas with very interesting colorations and types of designs to them. You'll also notice some very symmetrical patterns in the snow and ice. And it makes you ask yourself, well, how were these designed? And is this strictly the architecture of Mother Nature or whatnot? And well, let's get to it right away and enjoy on behalf of Effective Evolution. Hello and welcome to Effective Evolution. And today we're going over Mars Panorama 24146. And you could obtain this at the JPL website, photojournal, and also other sources. And with this particular area, you could readily notice some very noticeable landmarks, quote. And you must ask yourself, well, are these just debris from space creating craters? Or what else could these be? And you might notice some very interesting objects initially, and notice the very designed patterns which seem like they're hidden under the snow. There are also some very interesting objects in here, around here, and we'll go over that just a bit. And zooming in, you could pick out some objects immediately. And with this particular selection and highlighting some areas, we will put some attention on these areas and find what we can with regards to detail, and hopefully we could come up with some prognosis about their implications or whatnot. More acquainted with this panorama of Mars 24146, you could get some more detail and play around with the various angles of perception or whatnot, and using some of the gadgets. For example, the exposure tool and also the contrast tool, you can get some very interesting and revealing shades or whatnot. And in particular, we'll focus in a bit on this area here. As we mentioned at the start, there is an object here, interesting formations here. And after your eyes adjust somewhat, you'll probably notice this very symmetrical object here. And if we go in a bit further, you might want to ask yourself, well, what exactly is this? Just look at the linear creative designs around it. And it's just laying on top of the surface here. Whereas the other areas around it, you would conjecture that they're probably covered with snow. But this object seems to be on the top of the surface for some reason. And what can that be? It could be some type of vehicle or building or object. Perhaps 100 meters wide, 80 meters high or so, or a bit more or whatnot. And you could probably notice these interesting grooves. Seem to be oval, hairpin structure like. Could they be some type of entrance? This brightness tool and the burn tool will try to bring out some shadowy and darker areas to bring out some more detail as possible, and you get this type of pattern. And perhaps you can notice some more intricate detail here. You can probably notice this groove here as well. What exactly would that imply? To probe a bit more with this particular perspective, you could probably notice another strange pattern here. Supposedly covered under the snow and ice or whatnot. Are these just landforms, or could they be something more? And this object here seems to be rising off of the ground somewhat. What exactly could that be? And just notice the round part of this structure here with the sun shining off of the tip here just before these impact areas or whatnot. And adjusting the exposure tool a bit, you can notice that groove we mentioned earlier seems to have more design to it now. Is that a natural landform, or is it something dragging along the surface, creating that gouge or that throw or whatnot? And that object we just mentioned seems to have some more shadows. Notice the horseshoe type of pattern here. And those objects we mentioned earlier do have some more shadows to them as well. This semicircular pattern, supposedly under the snow and ice. And the landform does seem to have some more complexities to them. This view. Are these designs made by otherworldly types of influence, or is it strictly natural or whatnot? Please come up with your own synopsis. Also notice with this object we just mentioned, it does seem to have a concave surface here and a perfectly cylindrical top or side or whatnot. And it does stand out compared to some other parts of this panorama. Very interesting to have some ideas about what it could be. Is it some type of craft, semi-hidden under the snow, or some type of object? And this design is very interesting too. Seems to be a groove on the side, covered by snow. It is quite symmetrical. It's also some type of opening on the other side as well. What would that be? Hopefully we can bring out some more detail with that. And also these, quote, craters seem to be very circular. Almost too circular to be made by nature alone. They look more like openings or whatnot. Perhaps to under the surface of this area of Mars 24146. Some other cavity-like structures have been noticed, or crater-like structures, whatever you'd like to label them as or whatnot. And they have been found to have some objects inside of them as well. So this wouldn't be the first time we've come across a perfectly circular design to the surface. And also, I just noticed this other object here appears to have some type of point at the top. Seems to be a pyramid-like structure. In addition, the impact sites of this area here, there are some peculiarities that we'll look into. And just to zoom in a bit, now you can see that there are marks here on the outside of this supposedly the impact points or whatnot, and with the use of some probing tools such as the exposure tool, we'll zoom in a bit more and find out what we can using some anecdotal brightness adjustments here, contrast tools as well. Going in a bit further, you'll probably notice that there are some peculiarities, and just notice the kind of bizarre shapes around this area where there should have been an impact or whatnot. There seems to be structures around here. As a matter of fact, there's structures around here as well. And in this particular area here, it's really mind-boggling to determine where the impact site would be. If there was debris flying around, so to speak, where exactly would it be? And just look at the very circular patterns here. And same with this area here. You could probably notice a structure right around here, a linear structure. Now, if there was an impact here, why is there a structure here? Just out of curiosity, and around it as well, you could probably notice some intricate designs there, as well as here. And this is supposed to be snow and ice or whatnot, but on closer probing, you'd want to ask yourself, well, what exactly is going on here? Is this debris or whatnot, or is it a scenario where some type of object is entering under the surface? Or it's just mind-boggling. And playing around with the transform gadgets, you can still see that there are peculiar shapes around this area. Mind you, around here there is the somewhat linear blobs, if you'd like, of where an impact would have been, supposedly creating craters or whatnot. And yet, the craters seem to be circular here and here, almost too circular. Are there entrances into the underground surface here? It's just very interesting to come up with some ideas about that. Just notice the structures around here. And here, if there was an impact here, you wouldn't expect to find these types of structures so in proximity to the bombardment zone or whatever, the impact zone or whatnot. Noted earlier, we'll use some more tools to probe a bit further, and when you use some of the adjustment gadgets, you can readily notice there are some peculiar patterns around this object, and the cylinder that's somewhat rounded at this part does seem to be joined to another shape that conglomerates into a point and then a ridge. What exactly would that be? Is that some type of building or vehicle or craft as well? And
playing around with the shadows or whatnot, you can still notice various designs all over the place in this supposedly snow and ice covered topography or whatnot. But you must admit that it is open to speculation as to what it could be. And just notice right now, just in the contrast Tulibet, there does appear to be a very circular opening at the top. As a matter of fact, maybe two somewhat circular openings at the top. How is that natural? And the sun would be coming from this direction here. That's quite a shadow, indicative of a bizarre type of structure. And this object just to the side of it, we noted that it might have been some type of pyramid with a point on the top. That also has a shadow here too. It seems to be somewhat rounded. Very symmetrical. Getting back to the topography of pia24146. Snow covered and ice covered and all. When we have a closer look at the surface of these very intriguing patterns here, you could probably notice some very peculiar occurrences. And we'll zoom in a bit here and use some more tinting. We mentioned there does appear to be some type of object on the surface here. And you can probably pick out some other objects around here as well. They could in fact be entrances to the under part of the surface and under the surface and whatnot. And this structure here looks pretty intriguing as well. In addition to this object here and this object here and this area here as well. And when we zoom in a bit further, we get to this type of scenario. And here's that object that we noted at the start. It does appear to be very symmetrical, very designed. Is this some type of craft or whatnot? Just notice the linear patterns around it as well. It's an interesting pattern here too. Here. All over the place actually if you get familiar with the terrain.
After going over this area of Mars, which would be pia24146, there are interesting objects, and that particular area that was initially probed could in fact be some type of vehicle, whether it's a spacecraft or a building structure under the ice and snow. It's up to conjecture or whatnot. And since it does have a shadow, it does appear to be on top of the surface. So that would add to the intrigue regarding what that particular object could be. And also the craters that seem to have perfect circular patterns would indicate that they do have the propensity to be something else, i.e. an entrance to the underpart of the surface or not. And there are many objects, of course, that seem to design to be created just by chance itself, i.e. an otherworldly type of creativity would be behind it all. And hopefully you found this particular episode of Mars, the area 24146, very interesting. And until next time, continue with your exploration. And thank you for your time investment on behalf of effective evolution. Thank you for your time.